In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to get the best results out of your color negative films when scanning at home. Now, no one really enjoys scanning, but if you can get a good scan at home, you're going to save loads of money on lab fees, and it's really not that bad once you get into it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through my process. I'm going to be using an Epson flatbeds and Silverfast software. I have been sponsored by Silverfast to make this video, but I'm not going to be biased. It is great. I've been using it for a couple of years, and yeah, I'm going to show you some of the results you can get out of it. If your pictures are currently looking a bit like this, then hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have them looking like this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through different options within the software. I'm actually going to show you the process of loading a scanner because it can be more important than you think. And by the end, you should be better. You should find it a little bit easier. And most importantly, you're not going to have to spend quite so much time sitting at your computer stressing about it. I've got some portrait here. I've actually got a load of different sizes, but I think I'm going to scan one of the medium formats. I know that portrait is a very popular film, and it's particularly popular for its color. So a big aim in this video is to help you guys get the color rendition you want. After all, if you can't get your film scans to have that beautiful filmic kind of pastel look, then what's the point of shooting film? Let's jump into me loading the scanner, and yeah, follow on from there, and hopefully I'll teach you something about scanning. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to load some film into the scanner. Now we've got two main objectives here. We're going to try and keep the film as dust free as possible and also as flat as possible in the holder so you get the correct focus. First things first, I've got my cotton gloves on. These are absolutely great, they're absolutely mandatory. With these I can pick up and manipulate the film, whereas without them I'd get fingerprints, oil, scratches, all kinds of bad stuff on the negatives. So I'm going to get my film holder out. This is just a plastic frame designed to hold the film at the correct height above the scanning sensor. Pop this open and let's have a look. I think I'm going to scan this piece of medium format film. So these are a couple of 6x45 portraits. Now, looking at the film, if you read the text along the rebate left to right as it should be read, that means you're looking at the front of the film. And the film actually goes backwards into the holder. So what I'm going to do is turn it upside down. So I'm looking at the bottom of the film and just use this rocket blur to clean off as much dust as I can. Now, you never get all of it, but the more you get, the less you have to deal with in the software. So it's good to give it a thorough clean. Once that looks good, it's very important to hold it upside down so that no dust is settling on the underside of it. Now that that's clean, I'm going to have one last pass over the perspex. Let's give that a blast with a rocket blur as well. And I can place this down. When you're lining it up in the tray, you want to make sure that parts of the film are on the raised sections on either side. Now the reason for that is when you close the trap and click it down, it actually pinches the film in and presses it against the plastic. Now that looks good to me. You'll notice that last time I didn't actually clean the top of it, so I'll do that now. I think I'm only going to scan this left frame, so I'm going to pay extra attention to getting that as clean as possible. Right, and now as soon as that's clean, again, because of the constant dust problem, I'm going to turn that upside down. Okay, just going to have a quick look at my flatbed, make sure that's clean as well. Once you're happy with everything, all you got to do is line up your tray, close the lid, and that's ready to scan. Okay, let's see what we have in Silverfast. Here we go, takes a second to boot up. Right then. First things first, we're just going to go up here and select the correct medium. Now, this is a transparency and it is also a negative. And in my color options, I have various outputs. I mean, I could have grayscale, I could have the raw, which doesn't actually apply any of the settings. If I wanted to do a lot of post-processing afterwards, I could use 48-bit, but because I'm going to do it all within Silverfast, I'm going to go for 48 to 24-bit, probably your best option if you're scanning color. And next up, I'm going to hit pre-scan, and what that's going to do is a very quick, low resolution overview of everything that's loaded. Now you can see these pictures of Hampstead Heath are not what I just loaded, and that's because it actually keeps a preview of the last thing that it saw. This won't take a second. While that's actually doing its thing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here and I'm going to rename this file to YouTube, and I'm going to set my output to my desktop. Okay, so now I've got some slightly washed out looking scans. The reason for that is that I haven't set my frame correctly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by resetting it, and then I'm going to put this red box as accurate as I can over this left frame. Okay, good way to do this is to be a little bit inaccurate at the start and then to click this magnifying glass here. And what that will let me do is zoom in and get a much more precise look at what's in the scanner. As you can see, I'm being fairly careful, but it's not too big a deal if I do crop into the image somewhat. It might actually be the case that I crop this well into the image because there's quite a lot of empty space on this side of the frame. But for now, I'm going to leave it like that. Right then, now that we've set the scan frame, I'm able to get an accurate look at my output size when I change the resolution slider. Now, this is quite a contentious issue, and people say that some flatbeds can't really go above 2400. I'm going to risk it. I'm going to go for 3200 and really try and get as much detail out of this image as I can. And as you can see, that gives me a 7000 by 5000 pixel result. So it's around 35-40 megapixels, and definitely enough detail for printing up to A3. Right, that's all good. Let's close scan dimensions, and I guess let's go down in order. No, let's not go in order, because the next most important tool, and this is a phenomenally important tool, is Negafix. Now, huge amount of work has gone into this tool. Apparently they have a different film profile for every single scanner they make software for. So if you have an Epson V700, you have a different profile for your film than a Plus-Tech or a Reflector or whatever you buy. I've shot this on Kodak Portra 400, so I'm going to go down to my Portra and I'm going to look at my Portra options. Actually, this is Portra 160 because I'm using a studio light, so I wouldn't have used the higher speed stuff. That looks good. Also within this tool is this exposure bar. Now, this isn't actually increasing the exposure time or kind of widening your aperture, increasing your ISO. It's not a true increase in exposure. What it is just the software globally adjusting the brightness. Now, I metered this with a flash meter, so I'm pretty happy leaving it at 0. But if you have underexposed your image, obviously you can bump it up and you'll see that it does bring out a bit of the shadows up here. And likewise, you can try and recover a little bit of detail in your highlights if you do overshoot. Now let's put this to 0. That looks pretty good. I'm going to quickly turn off this preset so you can see quite how much of a difference it makes. So this is the Portra 160 preset, and this is no preset. Can you see how the colors, there's a certain orange cast to this image now. Let's go back into Portra, and it does make a huge difference. That was 160. Okay, I'm going to close Negafix, and the next tool I'm going to look at is the set of tools that help you with your exposure. Now, I've shown you the straight up positive, negative 3-stop exposure slider, but apart from that, you can also use tools to help you set your black point, your white point, and also your midtones. Now, the easiest way to start with that is the histogram tool. In this tool, you can adjust your black point, which is how much of the image is registered as black, your white point, and by bringing this in, you obviously register more of the image as white, and your midtone, which really acts similarly to exposure, and it's adjusting the kind of the gradation, how much of the image falls as a highlight and how much as a shadow. As you can see, I'm actually brightening the image up a little bit. I do like the shadows, but I just quite like the effect that a bit more light has on the skin. You can see I've given that a value of +15. That's reflected here, and actually If I open my gradation tool, which is the next one we look at, it's reflected here as well. When you're using the histogram, you can change it to look at your different color channels. Obviously this is 24-bit RGB, or you can overlay them like this. If you use Lightroom, you might be more used to this kind of thing, but I'm happy with additive. The gradation, or curves as Adobe call it, is a pretty simple tool. I'm going to add a little bit of contrast to my image, and I'm going to do that by gently sliding up, and as you can see, it gives it that classic S shape. It's actually a little bit too much because I'm losing detail in the hair, so maybe 4 is enough. I was using a beauty dish, so it's going to be quite contrasty anyway because you've got this fall off on the backdrop. That's fine. I don't need to do too much in the software because I did it when I took the photo, which obviously people say is better. Okay, if there's other areas of the image that you'd like to draw detail out of, say that you really underexposed your image and you just want to get a tiny bit more out of the shadows, a good tool to use would be the multiple exposure tool. What this does is 2 separate scans, one of which is done at a much higher exposure than the other, and it then blends them together and gives you a kind of in-scanner HDR of your shot. It's useful in certain cases, but for a correctly exposed image like this, I'm not going to use it. Likewise, this tool here, Adaptive Auto Contrast Optimization, what it does is it tries to bring a little bit of detail out of the darker areas. In fact, what I'll do now is I'll go down here and I'll turn it on and off. And if you watch areas like here, the shadow here goes from very dark to black. I prefer it black, but the very dark, I mean, I guess there's a bit more detail. Again, situational, I don't need it, and for that reason I'm going to click the X, and that kind of closed it down completely. Now, you might be thinking that this image here looks pretty good to go already, but there are a few more tools that I'd like to show you before I get onto color. Let's close these down because it can get a little bit clustered. Obviously, you can do this in Photoshop or whatever, but I like to do it in the scanning software, and I'll show you why. I'm talking about sharpening. I'm going to open up my sharpening tool and I'm going to use this option here, which is the high quality preview. What this does is a full one-to-one preview of the entire frame. And by doing this, I'm able to see exactly how the scan will render with the adjustments I've already given it. So far, I'm just using auto sharpness, and that is a great default. I'll be honest, 90% of the time I use auto sharpness. The only reason I adjust is if I think a landscape image can take a little bit more sharpening, or if it's over sharpened. Over sharpening is something that's very important to avoid with any kind of photography, but when you get the haloing or the kind of the crispy effect on edge borders, you can detract from the image. So I'm always cognizant of that. I've got a radius of 2.3, that is quite big, so maybe I can tone him down a little bit before the scan takes effect. And power of 260. It's high, but I've seen it higher, so I'm going to let this happen. This will take a couple of minutes, so I'll skip forward until it's done. Great, so the preview scan is complete, and as you can see, it's kind of just snapped into HD. I can use this yellow rectangle in the navigator tool to pan around the image. So let's check for some critical focus. Looks pretty good. I mean, I'm seeing the definition in the eyelashes, so that's a pretty good sign. There's a bit of dust that's on the negative, so you have to remember, as hard as you try to keep it clean, you're never going to get it 100%. Apart from that, I think this looks pretty good. I'm mainly looking at this point in terms of sharpening. I'm wondering what happens if I add a little bit more radius, maybe a little bit more power as well. Because it's applying it to the scan that's sort of held as a preview, it will have to reprocess the filter. So give it a second. As with most things scanning, it is going to take a while, but it is worth it because doing it like this, I have a complete real-time look at how it will come out before I actually click the scan button. And obviously with a flatbed, it is good to get as much sharpness as possible because they do struggle sometimes. So here we go. That looks good to me, and importantly, I can't see any evidence of over sharpening, so I'm pretty happy with that. Let's have a look at some of the other areas of focus. I think it's mainly on the eyes, which is obviously great for a portrait. So yeah, it seems like this is the sharpest area around here. That looks good to me. Now that we've got it nice and sharp, the next important thing to do is to use the ISRD tool to take the dust and scratches and other nonsense out of the image. If you see up here by the side, there's these little flecks of dust, and although I did my best to clean it, I missed a few. That's fine, because this tool here, ISRD, can get the rest for me. What this does is it applies a second pass of the scanner with an infrared detection channel, and what it will do is it will pass that infrared light through the scanner, and it's actually able to detect dust and defects on the negative. Now, it will take a couple of minutes, but when this is done, what the software will do is attempt to mask it for me. Essentially, it's like the clone tool in Photoshop. It's just Silverfast saying, I think this is dust, and I'm going to put something over it that's of a similar color of its surroundings. Whilst this is doing its scan, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look around and see if I can find a really obvious piece of dust. And I'll show you a before and after, so you can see quite how well the software's done. There we go. I think there was one on her hand. Okay. Can you see here this circle of, I don't know if that's dust or a scratch. To be honest, it could at this point also be a development error, but I think the software will be able to find it. Now, it does best with dust and it's fairly good with scratches, but if you have problems with development, it can sometimes get a bit confused. Essentially, it has to treat infrared differently to normal film to actually have an effect, but I think it should be able to do that. Manually spotting this using Photoshop or other editing software would take hours, so put your faith in ISRD. It does take a while, but it can really, really save you time. I mean, it saved me hundreds of hours already, I'm sure of it. So you can see a bit of dust down here as well. Okay, and now that it's done, you see an incredible reduction of dust. Let's go back up to the hand. I think that's the difficult one. And as you can see, because it's a development defect, it has just drawn a little circle around it. Okay, there was also some dust up here by the left eye. Let's have a look. Okay, and as you can see, it's caught all the stuff I missed. That's great. Okay, so I've got a sharp scan, I've got a dust-free scan. What I'm going to do is I'm going to close these two dialogues. Actually, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to click on HQ and just come back out of that into one-to-one. Okay, I have actually lost the preview with the dust reduction, but that's okay because having done the one-to-one, I know that it works. So what I've done now is gone back to the full image, and that's so I can focus on adjusting the color, and that's really the last step. So the two major tools in Silverfast for color are Global CC and Selective CC. Selective CC, as the name suggests, only affects particular color channels. I'm not going to use that in this particular image, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on it and just show you how it works, so that if the image that you're scanning requires it, you know how it works. Now, this wheel sort of shows you what color channel you're affecting. To pick a new one, because as it's set to red, there's not really anything affecting this image. What I can do is just click any area of the image and it will choose the color that corresponds to it. Now, this image is really grey skin tone and a bit of gold in the hair. So what I'll do is I'll pick up some gold or yellow over here, and I'll just show you what happens if I play around with it. This is just hue, saturation and luminance, the three classic color adjustment tools. I can adjust my hue, I can sort of bring it into orange, although I'm not sure that they'd appreciate that portrait. Obviously I can move it the other way. Looks very unhealthy. Let's put that back to 0. Yeah, there we go. Now you can adjust the saturation as well, and actually can have a subtler effect if you do this very gently, but yeah, even a -10 is quite noticeable. Okay, luminance just adjusts the sort of the brightness value, so I can make it very reflective or kind of matte looking, although because the hair tone and the skin color are similar in this instance, I'm not sure this is a good idea. I was just trying to give you a quick overview of what this does, and it's sort of attacking my image now. So what I'm going to do is use this tool here, which is the deactivate tool, just to kick this tool out of my sidebar. And any tool that doesn't have a red dot under it is sort of turned off. So you can see selective turned off. The tool I am going to use is Global CC, and this is an incredibly useful tool. I think this is one of the best tools that they actually have in Silverfast, and I think it's better than Color Perfect. So when I use this tool, what I'm trying to do is identify color casts or add tints. If, say, let's just give this image a blue color cast, just to have a look at the result. So do you remember at the start when I showed you the kind of the bad scan? So this is a very cool color rendition of the same image. And what you've got to do is you've got to look at colors that you're familiar with, for example skin tones, or this is actually a neutral backdrop, and you can diagnose the color cast, and then using this tool you drag the dot away from the color that you're trying to move away from. So the central point here is actually pretty neutral, but if I had an image that was less neutral, or my scanner had given it a strange cast, maybe Negafix hadn't actually done such a good job and it looked a little bit wrong for some reason, what you can do is use this to fix that problem. Now, I remember at the start when I first turned on Negafix, there was quite a magenta cast. So what I'll do is I'll turn this off so I can show you. Here we go. So here's my magenta looking image. And what I'll do with this tool, just resetting it again, is diagnose where I think the color cast is. I think the color cast is somewhere around here. So what I'm going to do is just move this dot completely away from it. And as you can see, what I've done by moving this dot into the green is actually in some way mimic Negafix and actually kind of correct the image. Let's turn that back off and you can see what it looks like with a color cast. So to treat a magenta color cast, you're just dragging away from magenta. I've actually gone a little bit too far, it's kind of gone scary green. With this tool, slice adjustments are really important, because if you go anywhere near the edge, you're going to get an abomination. Just wait for this to render. Yeah, obviously that's gone a bit wrong. Another interesting thing is your ability to use the... Let me just turn Negafix on before talking about that. So you can use specific areas of the tone curve when you're doing your adjustments. Let's close Negafix. Up here, I have this 3-bar option, which means that it affects all of the image. So when I move this to make the image a bit warmer, what I'm doing is I'm making the shadows, midtones, and highlights warmer equally. And that's great, but sometimes you want to do it differently. So with this, what I could do is I could only affect kind of shadow areas. So if you watch up here in the top left, which is probably the darkest part of the image, what I can do is I can make that very blue. Sorry, I'm in highlights. Let's reset this for a second. So what if I wanted to make my shadows? Yeah, I go over here. So I can make the shadows, or the darkest one, makes sense, blue. It's a little bit of a cross-process effect. Midtones is the most similar to the all tones slider. There's not too much difference, especially because even in this fairly contrasty image, most of the image is midtone. Highlights, I can do a little tint to the skin. So say I wanted to make her a little bit more tanned. I can drag down on the yellow, stuff like that. Let's turn this off and see how much effect it's had. Yeah, I've really just changed the skin tone very slightly, but it's really important to get your skin tones right, especially with portrait. A film that's renowned for having such good skin tones, you really want to do it correct in the camera. I like the idea of having another tint in the shadows, but I don't know if I don't want to mess it up too much. Let's have a play with this. That's going a bit wrong. I'm not sure I like that. I'll put it back in neutral. Okay. This is probably the most important tool to get your scans looking as they should. Combining color correction with Negafix will get you 99% of the way there, and the rest of it is really just filling in the gaps around the image. Now, I'm happy with this very slight adjustment I've made. You can see that all I've done is just dragged it to make it slightly warmer. I think that's good. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go just quickly check YouTube desktop. I have got this output file format option, and I can put it as a JPEG. Obviously, I would use a JPEG if it was for immediate web sharing, but because it's more kind of archival, I'll keep this as a save file before I post it or print it. I'm going to click TIFF, and yeah, time to click scan. Right, scan's done, it says finished. What I'm going to do is close down that, and here's my file. Now what I'm going to do is just open up Photoshop to get rid of that spot on the hand. So this shouldn't take a second. Let's get my spot healing brush tool, go to the hand and just click. Okay, done. Whilst I'm here, I am actually going to have a quick look at my image size. I think this might be a little bit too big, so I'm going to make this 4000 pixels tall. Actually, 3000 pixels tall. See, I've taken it from 100 megabytes to 19. It's always worth doing. Okay, lastly, I've just noticed down in this bottom corner that I've missed a little bit of the frame. What I could do is either crop in or be cheeky and just use my spot adjustment to do that, and there you go, good as new. Okay, here's my finished image. Okay, that just about wraps things up. Thanks for watching. If you have any further questions, then please don't hesitate to leave a comment. I'm pretty good at replying to those. I've also made another version of this video, which is specifically about black and white film. So if that's something you're interested in, then check out this link, could help. Obviously, a lot of the stuff is quite similar. There's a bit of overlap, but I do think that there are some black and white specific tips. Apart from that, yeah, if you like the video, you can like, you can subscribe, all that good stuff. And yeah, thanks for watching.